Friend, I know what it feels like to go through seasons where the pain seems unending. When the nights are long, the tears are real, and the questions in your heart are louder than the answers you can hear. In those moments, you might wonder, God, do you see me? Do you care? Why is this happening to me? I want you to hear this. God's plan for your life is far greater than the pain you feel right now. You may not understand it in the moment, but God never wastes a hurt. Every tear you've cried, every heartbreak you've endured, every disappointment you've faced, He can use it to shape your character, grow your faith, and prepare you for something you cannot yet see. The Bible says in Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. Notice it doesn't say all things are good. Pain is not good. Loss is not good. Betrayal is not good. But God can take the very things that the enemy meant for harm and weave them into a tapestry of blessing. Think of it like the back of a beautiful embroidery. From the underside, all you see is tangled threads and messy knots. That's what life looks like when you're in the middle of pain. But from the top, from God's perspective, there's a masterpiece in the making. You just can't see it yet. When Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and falsely accused, it looked like his life was falling apart. But years later, he could stand before those same brothers and say, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. That's the power of God's plan. It redeems even the worst chapters of our story. So what do you do when the pain feels heavier than the plan? You trust the one who holds the plan. You keep walking by faith, not by sight. You choose to believe that the same God who brought you this far will not abandon you now. Your pain is temporary, but God's purpose is eternal. The very thing you're going through right now might be the preparation for the breakthrough you've been praying for. Don't quit in the middle of the chapter. God is still writing your story. And when you see the ending, you'll understand that His plan was greater than your pain all along. When you're walking through pain, it's easy to think it's meaningless, that it's just something to endure until it passes. But with God, nothing is meaningless. Every moment, every tear, every sleepless night, He sees it and He's able to use it. That's what makes Him different from anyone else in your life. People may sympathize with you, they may even try to help, but only God can take your deepest wounds and transform them into tools for growth and blessing. He is the master weaver, taking threads of sorrow and weaving them into something that will one day make sense from the other side. It's hard to believe this when you're still in the middle of the storm. The wind is strong, the rain is pounding, and you can barely see a few steps ahead. In those moments, your heart cries out, "Oh, why? God, why me?" And while we often want instant answers, God often works in seasons. You may not understand the why now, but you can trust that He is working behind the scenes. Just like a seed planted in the ground, your breakthrough is germinating in the dark, even if you can't see it yet. Think of the story of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. It would have been easy for Joseph to believe his life was ruined. But through every trial, God was positioning him for a greater purpose, to save a nation and his own family. What looked like wasted years were actually training years. Each step of suffering was shaping his character, deepening his dependence on God, and preparing him for a role he could never have imagined. Without the pit, without the prison, Joseph might never have been ready for the palace. That's how God works in our lives too. He takes the things we think are setbacks and uses them as setup. Your pain may be the very thing that equips you to help someone else later. The comfort you receive from God in your suffering can be the same comfort you give to another person in theirs. This is why your story matters. What you've been through, no matter how dark or messy, becomes a testimony of His faithfulness. When you share it, others can see that if God brought you through, He can bring them through too. Sometimes we want God to remove the pain immediately, but there are moments when He allows it to remain because it's doing a work in us that nothing else could. Pain can refine us like fire refines gold. It strips away pride, self-reliance, and false security, leaving us more dependent on Him. It teaches us empathy for others. It reminds us that our hope isn't in our circumstances, but in the God who never changes. We often think the shortest route to joy is avoiding pain, but in God's economy, pain can be the very pathway to joy. Jesus himself endured unimaginable suffering, and yet it was through that suffering that salvation came to the world. Hebrews 12:2 says, "For the joy set before him, he endured the cross." He didn't enjoy the cross. He endured it because he knew what it would accomplish. Your pain may not be enjoyable, but it can be endurable when you understand that God is using it for a greater outcome. When you feel like your pain is pointless, remember that God is a redeemer. He doesn't just patch things up. He restores them to something even better. He can take the broken pieces of your life and create something more beautiful than before. What you see as loss, he can turn into gain. What you see as failure, he can turn into a new chapter. What you see as the end, he can transform into a new beginning. In fact, the areas where you've been hurt the most can become the areas where you minister the most. The person who's been through grief can comfort someone grieving. The one who's been through addiction can guide someone struggling. The one who's been through heartbreak can walk alongside someone whose heart is breaking. God never wastes a hurt because he knows how to redeem it and multiply it for the good of others and the glory of his name. Even when you can't see how any good could possibly come from your situation, you can rest in knowing that God's perspective is higher than yours. He sees the end from the beginning. He knows the twists and turns your journey will take, and he knows how each one will lead you to where you're meant to be. That means nothing you've been through is random. Every detail is part of a larger design. Your role is to keep trusting him, even when the pain hasn't lifted yet. That's right. Keep walking, even if it's with a limp. Keep praying, even when you don't feel like it. Keep believing that he is who he says he is and that he will do what he has promised. Because one day you'll be able to look back and see that even the moments you thought were the most painful were actually part of God's preparation for something greater. That pain feels heavy when you're carrying it, and in the middle of it, it can feel like it will never end. Days stretch long, nights feel endless, and the weight in your heart seems to follow you everywhere. It's easy to think this is how it will always be, but no matter how deep the hurt or how intense the suffering, pain is temporary. It is not forever. God's purpose, on the other hand, is unshakable, unending, and eternal. The things you're facing right now may be difficult to endure, but they are not permanent. They are chapters in a much bigger story that God is still writing. When you zoom out and look at your life from God's perspective, you begin to see how small this moment is compared to eternity. Scripture reminds us in 2 Corinthians 4:17 that our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. That doesn't mean your pain feels light or momentary while you're in it. It may feel crushing and never ending. But in comparison to God's eternal purpose for you, it is just one step on the way to something much greater. Life on this earth is full of seasons. Just like winter eventually turns into spring, every season of hardship will eventually give way to a season of renewal. Pain might be a season you are in, but it's not your identity, and it's not your destiny. You are not defined by what you are going through. You are defined by the God who is leading you through it. When you understand that, you can face even the hardest trials with the confidence that they are temporary and that God's plan for your life is built to last forever. Now, there's a danger in letting pain convince you it's permanent. When you start to believe that this is just how it is now, you stop looking forward to the future. You stop expecting God to move. You start living small, bracing yourself for the next blow instead of stepping into the next blessing. But the truth is, your pain may have an expiration date you can't see yet. Just because you can't see the end doesn't mean it's not on the way. God knows the exact moment when the weight will lift, when the answer will come, when the breakthrough will happen. It helps to remember that even Jesus endured pain with the awareness of its temporary nature. Hebrews tells us that he endured the cross for the joy set before him. He could face the worst suffering imaginable because he knew it wasn't the end of the story. The resurrection was coming. Victory was on the other side. And in your life, the same principle applies. What you are facing now is not the final chapter. God's purposes are not hindered by your pain. In many cases, they are accomplished through it. Sometimes the temporary pain you endure now is what prepares you for the eternal purpose God has in mind. A soldier doesn't enjoy the grueling training, but that training equips him for the battles ahead. A runner doesn't enjoy the burning in their muscles, but that pain strengthens them for the race. In the same way, God can use the very thing that hurts you to strengthen your faith, deepen your trust, and prepare you for the purpose He created you to fulfill. It's also important to see how pain changes its meaning in the light of eternity. The difficulties you experience here will not follow you into God's eternal kingdom. Revelation 21:4 promises that one day He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, mourning, crying, or pain. That means no matter how bad it gets here, there is a day coming when pain will be gone forever. The same cannot be said of God's purpose. It will last forever, and it will be fulfilled. When you live with this eternal perspective, pain loses some of its power over you. It might still hurt, but it can't define you. It might still challenge you, but it can't destroy you. It might still test you, but it can't erase the truth that God's purposes are unstoppable. Even the enemy's best attempts to derail your life cannot cancel what God has already planned. Pain can delay, but it cannot deny the destiny God has placed on your life. This is why hope is so critical when you're walking through pain. Hope anchors you to the truth that this is not the end, mighty end. Hope reminds you that even when you can't see the finish line, it's still there. Hope lifts your eyes from the storm to the horizon, where the sun will rise again. And hope is rooted in God's promises, which have no expiration date. Quote, you may not know how long this season will last, but you can be certain it will not last forever. God has already written an ending to this chapter, and that ending fits perfectly into His eternal purpose for your life. Pain may have a hold on your heart right now, but it cannot hold back the hand of God from moving in your situation. Every moment you endure in faith is a moment that is shaping you, refining you, and preparing you for the forever that He has promised. From where you stand right now, life might look messy and confusing. It might feel like everything is tangled, like nothing is fitting together the way it should. But what looks like chaos to you can actually be a masterpiece in progress from God's point of view. We see life in snapshots, one frame at a time, but God sees the whole movie. We see the brushstrokes up close, but God sees the finished painting hanging in the gallery. And while we focus on the knots and loose threads on the back of the embroidery, He sees the beautiful design being formed on the other side. It's in our nature to want clarity and order right now. We want life to make sense while we're living. We want every challenge to have a clear purpose we can identify immediately. But often, God works in ways we can't understand in the moment. Just because you can't see the bigger picture doesn't mean there isn't one. A child watching a sculptor carve might not understand why chunks of stone are being chipped away. It might look destructive, even wasteful. But the sculptor knows exactly what he's creating. And each cut is intentional. The same is true of God. Every part of your story is shaping you into something purposeful. The difficulty is that chaos doesn't feel holy. It feels frightening, overwhelming, and out of control. Yet it's often in those exact seasons that God does His deepest work. Think about the creation story in Genesis. In the beginning, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness covered the surface, and there was no shape to anything. But out of that chaos, God spoke order, beauty, and life into existence. Your life might feel formless right now, but that doesn't mean it's hopeless. God specializes in bringing beauty out of disorder. We can see this in the lives of people throughout Scripture. David was anointed to be king, but before he ever wore the crown, he spent years running for his life, hiding in caves and facing betrayal from people he trusted. To David, those years might have felt like chaos and delay, but to God, they were preparation. The pressure shaped his heart, deepened his dependence on God, and gave him the wisdom he would need as a leader. Without the chaos, David might not have been ready for the crown. The same principle plays out in our own lives. What feels like an interruption can actually be an introduction to something greater. What feels like a setback can actually be a setup. When plans fall apart, we assume it's failure, but sometimes it's God protecting us from something that would have destroyed us. Sometimes it's Him redirecting us to a path that leads to something far better than what we originally wanted. There's also a humbling truth in all of this. We are not the architect of our own story. God is. We may have plans and dreams, and those aren't bad, but God's vision is always larger and wiser than ours. Proverbs 16:9 reminds us that we can plan our way, but it's the Lord who establishes our steps. From our vantage point, the route He takes us on might seem inefficient, winding, and full of obstacles. But from His vantage point, every turn, every delay, and every detour is necessary to bring us to the exact place we need to be. It's also worth noting that chaos often reveals who we really are. When everything is in order, it's easy to appear strong, patient, and faithful. But when life feels out of control, our true character is revealed. And that's when God can refine it. He uses seasons of uncertainty to teach us how to rely on Him, how to find peace in His presence rather than in our circumstances, and how to trust that His hands are steady, even when everything else feels shaky. Another important thing to remember is that the chaos we see is often just a small part of the process. Think about a construction site. If you walk through a building halfway through construction, you might see exposed wires, piles of debris, and incomplete walls. It wouldn't look like a safe or beautiful place yet, but if you visited the same site months later, you'd see a finished, functional building. The mess was part of the process. It just wasn't the end product. In the same way, your current situation might be mid-construction. It may not look beautiful yet, but it's not finished either. Faith plays a crucial role here. Faith is trusting that God is creating something meaningful, even when you can't see the evidence yet. Faith is choosing to believe that the brushstrokes on the canvas have a purpose, even when they seem random. Faith is standing in the middle of the mess and saying, God, I trust that you know what you're doing. That trust doesn't make the chaos disappear, but it does give you the strength to keep going through it. Over time, you may start to notice that certain pieces begin to connect. Experiences you thought were random or pointless begin to make sense in hindsight. People you met by a coincidence turn out to be divine appointments. Skills you learned in one season suddenly become useful in another. Slowly, the threads begin to form a pattern, and you realize that what felt like scattered fragments was actually a carefully planned design. The beauty of God's handiwork is that it often surpasses anything we could have imagined for ourselves. When we try to control the picture, we tend to create something safe and predictable. But when we surrender control to Him, He paints on a much bigger canvas. He adds colors and details we would never have chosen, but they make the final picture richer and more meaningful. That's why what looks like chaos to you can, in God's hands, be a masterpiece in progress. There are moments in life when people hurt you, betray you, or work against you, and it feels like they've stolen something from you that can never be restored. The sting of betrayal or injustice can run deep, and the enemy would love for you to believe that those moments define you. But the truth is, God has the power to take what was meant for harm and turn it into something good for your future. That doesn't mean the harm was good. It means He is so great and so sovereign that He can redeem even the worst situations and use them to accomplish His purpose. The story of Joseph is one of the clearest pictures of this truth. His own brothers sold him into slavery, and he was taken to a foreign land against his will. He was lied about, thrown into prison, and forgotten. From the outside looking in, his life seemed like a tragic story of loss and injustice. But God was weaving a bigger plan. Every step of Joseph's painful journey was leading him to a position of influence in Egypt, where he would eventually save countless lives during a famine. When he finally confronted his brothers, he said something remarkable. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done. Those words echo through time as a reminder that human intentions do not have the final say. God's intentions do. What's powerful about this truth is that it's not limited to ancient stories. It's happening in lives right now. People may speak against you, scheme against you, or try to tear you down, but their actions are not the end of your story. God can use their schemes as stepping stones. He can use their opposition as the training ground for your calling. He can take the very thing they used to push you down and use it to lift you higher. This is why it's dangerous to get stuck in bitterness. When you let anger and resentment take root, you stay tied to the offense and the offender. But when you release it to God, you're freeing Him to work in your life without obstruction. Forgiveness doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It means you trust God enough to handle justice and redemption in His own way. When you hold on to hurt, it becomes your focus, but when you hand it to God, you make space for Him to turn it into something beautiful. Sometimes the harm you experience becomes the very foundation for the good God brings later. You may have gone through rejection, and that rejection led you to a place you never would have found otherwise. You may have been overlooked, but that allowed you to develop skills and humility that became essential for your next season. You may have been abandoned, but in that loneliness, you found a closeness with God you never had before. In every case, the pain was real, but so was God's redemption. One of the most freeing things you can realize is that you are not at the mercy of other people's decisions. Their actions may affect you for a time, but they cannot derail God's plan for your life. He is not limited by human will, and He is not surprised by human behavior. Before you were ever wronged, He already had a plan for how to turn it around for your good. This is why Romans 8:28 is such a powerful promise. It reminds us that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. All things includes the things people meant to harm you. It's also worth remembering that sometimes the harm leads to growth you wouldn't have pursued on your own. Pain can wake you up to truths you've been avoiding. It can push you to take steps you've been hesitant to take. It can reveal weaknesses in your foundation so you can strengthen them for the future. God doesn't cause the harm, but He can use the discomfort it brings to prepare you for greater responsibilities, deeper faith, and stronger resilience. From a distance, when you look back on the things that once devastated you, you often see how they became turning points. The betrayal that broke your heart might have led you to a new relationship or a new community that has blessed you beyond measure. The job you lost might have pushed you into a new career that became your true calling. The season of being overlooked might have given you the space to work on a dream God placed in your heart years ago. None of it feels good in the moment, but with time, the threads begin to connect. The enemy may try to convince you that what happened to you has ruined you. He wants you to think that harm has the final word. But God has the last word, and His word is always rooted in redemption. What others intend to use to break you, God can use to build you. What was sent to hold you back can be transformed into the very thing that propels you forward. Even in the moments when you can't see how anything good could come from what happened, you can trust that God is still working. Odds are us, still working. His perspective is not limited to the present moment. He sees the end from the beginning. He knows how to take the ashes of your pain and trade them for beauty. He knows how to turn mourning into dancing, sorrow into joy, and harm into help. Every wrong done to you can become part of a greater testimony that declares His faithfulness and power. Trusting the planner, even when you don't understand the plan, is one of the hardest lessons in life. Our natural instinct is to want control. We want to see the roadmap, know every turn in advance, and have clear explanations for why things are happening the way they are. But God often calls us to walk by faith, not by sight, which means trusting Him without having all the answers. This isn't easy because uncertainty can make us feel vulnerable. Yet it's in that very place of vulnerability where faith grows strongest. When you trust God as the planner, you're acknowledging that His wisdom is far greater than yours. Isaiah 55 8:9 reminds us that his thoughts are not our thoughts and his ways are not our ways. From his higher perspective, he sees connections and consequences that we could never imagine. We often make decisions based on what seems good now, but God makes plans based on what will be best for eternity. That means his path may sometimes take us through places we wouldn't choose for ourselves. Think of a parent leading a child through a crowded place. The child may want to run ahead, but the parent knows there are dangers the child can't see. So the parent takes their hand and leads them through, sometimes even pulling them in a different direction than they expected. The child might not like it in the moment, but it's the parent's knowledge and love that keeps them safe. In the same way, God leads us according to his perfect knowledge and love, even when the route doesn't make sense to us. We also need to understand that trust isn't passive, it's active. It's not sitting back and doing nothing. It's moving forward in obedience, even when the details aren't clear. Abraham was called by God to leave his home and go to a land God would show him without knowing exactly where he was going. That required action based on trust. You may be in a season where God is asking you to take steps without full visibility. But if you wait until you understand everything, you'll miss the opportunities he's placing in front of you. The challenge is that life will test this trust. There will be detours you didn't plan for, delays you didn't expect, and disappointments you didn't see coming. In those moments, it's tempting to think God has forgotten you or that his plan has failed. But his plan doesn't fail. It unfolds. What feels like a delay might be divine preparation. What feels like a detour might be divine protection. You might not see it now, but one day you'll realize those unexpected turns were exactly what position you for the blessing ahead. Trusting God as the planner also means surrendering your need to always know a why. We often think that if we understood the reason behind our trials, we'd find it easier to endure them. But sometimes knowing a why wouldn't comfort us, it might even overwhelm us. God, in his mercy, reveals only what we need for the step we're on. Like a GPS that gives you directions turn by turn, he leads you in increments, asking you to trust him for what's next rather than demanding the whole route up front. It's also worth remembering that God's plan for your life is not just about you, it's connected to the lives of others. Your obedience in one season might open doors for someone else in another. Your willingness to follow his leading might be the answer to prayers you didn't even know someone was praying. That's why trust matters so much, because his plan is a tapestry and every thread counts. There will be seasons when trusting God feels like walking in the dark with only a small light to guide your steps. The path might feel narrow and the obstacles might be close, but that small light, his word, his presence, his promises is enough to keep you moving. You may not see the whole road, but you have enough light for the next step. And that's all you need right now. The truth is, trust is built through relationship. The more you walk with God and see his faithfulness in your life, the easier it becomes to trust him in the unknowns. You remember the times he came through before, the doors he opened, the prayers he answered, and the ways he carried you when you couldn't carry yourself. Those memories fuel your faith and remind you that the planner is good, even if the plan feels hard. And when you finally reach the place he's been leading you to, you'll look back and see it differently. You'll see that the twists and turns weren't random. They were purposeful. You'll realize that the valleys taught you things the mountaintops never could. You'll understand that the closed doors were protecting you, not punishing you. You'll see that even the moments you doubted were covered by his grace. So today, even if you don't understand where the plan is taking you, place your trust in the one who designed it. Let go of the need to control every detail and rest in the fact that God knows exactly what he's doing. His timing is perfect. His ways are higher. His love for you is unshakable. And one day you'll see that every step was leading you exactly where you were meant to be.